Welcome, curious minds. Imagine you're on a kind of treasure hunt. But instead of gold, we're digging through stacks of old paper. We're looking for forgotten stories, hidden insights.
That's a great way to put it.
Today we're taking a deep dive into the really fascinating world of 16th century Dutch drawings.
Yeah, it's a period that's just packed with surprises.
And what makes this time so special, right, is how these drawings tell a much richer story than maybe earlier ones about their function, the techniques, even the subjects they show.
Exactly. It's far more diverse.
So our mission, if you will, is to sift through this amazing collection of rare, revealing works. Many were in a big exhibition, actually. And we want to uncover not just what they are, but, why they exist. What were their hidden purposes?
Prepare for some real aha moments.
Definitely, because these pieces, they offer this unique shortcut, a way to understand a really pivotal moment in art history.
And you see artists adapting, innovating. It's all there on paper. You can almost watch the evolution happening.
It feels like you can understand a whole century just by looking closely at these sheets.
You really can.
Okay, so let's start big picture. One of the first things that jumps out is just there are so many more 16th century drawings compared to the 15th century, and they're way more varied.
Right.
What does that sort of expanding horizon tell us about drawing itself, its role?
That's a crucial point. It really signals a fundamental shift. In the 16th century, drawing became this integral, versatile part of how artists worked.
Uh-huh.
I mean, in the 15th century, sometimes we're just guessing at why a drawing was made. But by the 16th, it's used for so much more.
So artists kind of unlocked its potential as a medium for everything from rough ideas to finished products.
That's a perfect way to describe it. They realized paper could do all of that.
So it's fair to say, then, that a huge chunk of these drawings, they weren't meant as standalone art, more like prep work, blueprints for bigger things.
Precisely. That's key to understanding how these artists thought, how they worked, planning, experimenting, refining ideas on paper before tackling the main event, so to speak.
Okay.
And a major category of these preparatory pieces, especially right around 1500, were drawings for stained glass.
Ah, stained glass.
Yeah, the art of vitrage, as it's called, went through a really significant change then.
When I think stained glass, I picture those huge Gothic cathedral windows, like Chartres. Bits of colored glass held together with lead, like a mosaic. Is that what we're talking about?
Well, that's the traditional Gothic way, yes. And it did have revivals even in the 1900s. But the 16th century saw something different take over.
Okay.
From around 1500 right through for centuries, actually, the main method became painted glass.
Painted glass. How did that work?
You'd take clear, transparent glass, then you'd paint the picture directly onto it with special glass paints, and then you'd fire it. Really hot temperatures.
Wow.
And that firing fused the colors right onto the glass.
That sounds incredibly precise. Must have required some serious planning. What kind of drawings did that need?
Exactly. This new method demanded really meticulous one-to-one scale drawings. Let's call them cartoons.
Cartoons, right. Like for frescoes, too.
Same principle. Glass painting was super specialized. The paints themselves were tricky. Colors could change like crazy during firing. Some paints didn't mix well.
Oh, okay.
So artists had to work fast, and these cartoons were their roadmaps. A precise guide showing exactly where to paint, what colors to use, no room for error on the glass itself.
So no improvising once you start painting the glass?
None at all. You needed that plan.
And I gather there were different types of this vitrage, not just the huge church windows.
Right. You still had the monumental stuff for churches, definitely. Huge windows, sometimes made of dozens of separate scenes. But there was also this new thing called cabinet vitrage.
Cabinet vitrage.
Yeah, miniature pieces. Often secular scenes, not religious, made for decoration in private homes, maybe a small panel in the middle of a window, more intimate.
Ah, I see. And a lot of the drawings we're looking at relate to those smaller ones.
A good number, yes. They give us a glimpse into domestic life and taste, too.
And these cartoons, the drawings themselves, they were valuable workshop tools, right? Saved, maybe reused?
Absolutely. Highly valued, kept safe in workshop archives. You could definitely reuse them multiple times for commissions.
Which explains why so many survived, relatively speaking. Like, you mentioned about a fifth of the drawings in that exhibition were for stained glass.
That's right. About 12 out of 60 in this particular group. It really underscores how important this was. They kick off the whole 16th century section, showing us how artists were thinking.
But they weren't just functional blueprints. You're saying there was an artistic evolution happening within the drawings themselves, different techniques emerging.
Definitely. We see everything from the first quick spark of an idea to these highly polished, finished plans. The whole process is laid bare.
Okay, so walk us through that. How does a drawing go from that initial spark to the final plan? Got an example?
Sure. There's an anonymous sheet from Leiden in the Hermitage collection, dated 1516. It's an early sketch for a stained glass piece.
Okay.
And it's drawn almost carelessly, but it's so expressive, almost caricatural, full of life.
Huh.
And what's often a giveaway for these cabinet vitrage pieces is the shape. Many of them and their drawings were circular. Tondo is the term. Usually about 20, 30 centimeters across.
Right, the round ones. That makes them easy to spot.
Immediately tells you the likely purpose.
I heard a funny thing about those circles. Sometimes the figures would kind of spill outside the lines.
Yes. Often the artist sketched on a regular rectangular sheet first, then drew the circle inside it. And yes, sometimes the figures would burst out of the circle boundary a bit.
Yeah.
Later on, maybe a collector would trim the paper right down to the circle, but you can sometimes still see traces of the original sketch beyond it.
So you have those rough, lively sketches. What about the other end? The polished blueprint.
Those are the finished cartoons. Much more detailed, very precise, absolutely no room left for correction. They were the direct guide, the exact template for the glass painter.
A really rigorous process, even for artists we don't know by name. Like, the master of the Death of Absalom, active around 1500 to 1520. How does an artist get a name like that? So dramatic.
It happens a lot in art history when the real name is lost. We call it a name of convenience.
Ah.
In his case, it comes from a drawing in the Louvre. It shows the biblical story, the Death of Absalom. And that drawing was so distinctive, it became the key piece, the cornerstone for grouping other works believed to be by the same hand.
So you build an identity around one key work.
Exactly. You recognize a style, a personality, and the Hermitage actually has one of his important works. It's a design for Vitrage. Shows a young man holding a tree trunk.
Okay, subject unclear.
A bit puzzling, yeah. There's an empty space above his head, probably meant for a description that would have explained it, but it was never filled in.
But there's a theory, right, about what this young man with a tree might be.
There is, and it's quite compelling. The hypothesis is that this drawing is part of a rare series based on a 16th century iconography, linking months to the ages of man.
Months and ages. How does that work?
So, like, January would represent age 6, February age 12, March age 18. And this drawing, the young man with the tree, is thought to be April, representing age 24.
Wow, that's specific, a whole philosophical concept in a drawing series.
It gives you a peek into a very particular artistic tradition. And kind of sadly, another drawing from this same series used to be in the Hermitage.
Used to be?
Yeah, it was sold off by the Soviet government back in the 1930s. Controversial sales.
What a story behind that one drawing. Okay, so we've touched on function, subject. Now let's shift to another big visual thing. Chiaroscuro. These drawings just look different, more colorful somehow. How did they get that effect?
Yes, the chiaroscuro technique on paper. It's really striking. The artist would start by manually dyeing the paper.
Dyeing the paper itself.
Yeah. So the back might stay white, but the front surface would get this rich color, green, blue, brown, ochre. Then they work on that colored surface with a very fine brush.
Okay.
Using white lead, or sometimes gouache, which is like opaque watercolor for the highlights, bright, brilliant whites, and then black ink, or maybe a dark brown bistre.
Bistre. What's that?
It's a pigment made from wood soot. Gives a nice warm, dark tone. They'd use that for the outlines and the shadows.
So colored paper, white highlights, dark lines and shadows.
Exactly. And that combination just pops. It creates this vibrant, really decorative and super expressive effect. It gives a real sense of depth, light, luminescence almost.
It really does look different. Now, the term chiaroscuro, people might know it from painting, that strong light-dark contrast. Or maybe woodcuts, is this the same thing?
Good question. It can be confusing because the name gets used in a few ways. Chiaroscuro just means light-dark in Italian, right?
Right.
And yes, it refers to that strong contrast modeling in painting and also to a specific technique of color woodcut printing using multiple blocks. But this drawing technique, dyed paper, white highlights, dark ink, is distinct from both of those, even though it shares the name.
Got it. So it's a specific drawing method. Where did it come from?
It seems to have originated in Italy, but it spread pretty quickly. It got really popular in Germany and right here in the Netherlands, especially in the first third of the 16th century. Shows how ideas traveled.
And certain artists or groups really went for it. I'm thinking of the Antwerp Mannerists. Sounds like a band name.
They were definitely a distinct group. It's a label coined by the great art historian Max Friedlander. He used it for artists whose work was Well, peculiar,
Hmm.
highly subjective, really sharply expressive.
Peculiar
It
how?
was like the very last gasp of European Gothic style. Think flamboyant Gothic architecture, but in painting and drawing. Really complex, sometimes contorted figures, elaborate drapery, intense emotion, not aiming for realism, more for a mystical feeling.
And chiaroscuro drawing was their go-to technique.
For many of them, yes. That colored paper with the glowing white highlights and the dark ink was perfect for the kind of effects they wanted.
Can you give us an example?
Sure, there's an anonymous Lamentation of Christ, sometimes called the Entombment, in the Hermitage collection. It's a classic Antwerp Mannerist piece using this technique.
Okay.
And if you look at it, the anatomy is deliberately distorted. The figures are elongated, twisted. It's not because the artist couldn't draw accurately. The line work is incredibly refined.
Mm-hmm.
It's a conscious choice to convey this mystical, irrational, almost fantastical vision. And those bright white highlights shining out from the colored background, they create this otherworldly, supernatural glow. It perfectly suited their artistic aims. It's using the technique to push the emotional message.
Wow. Technique serving the vision. Okay, so we've seen drawings as essential prep tools, especially for stained glass. Then we see this expressive chiaroscuro technique taking hold, but then around 1520, something else changes, right? What does a big, impressive drawing like the beheading of John the Baptist, also in chiaroscuro, tell us?
Ah, yes, that piece signals another really pivotal shift. It's a prime example of how, around this time, drawings themselves started being viewed as finished works of art, not just preparatory studies anymore.
Okay, so the drawing is the final product.
Potentially, yes, or at least a product valued in its own right. The beheading of John the Baptist was a hugely popular subject then, especially in Antwerp, maybe connected to the cult of St. John.
Mm-hmm.
And this drawing presents it very theatrically. It's set in a city square, crowds looking on, the banquet where Salome danced is pushed into the background. All focus is on the main tragic event.
And the artist, Pseudobliss, another one of those convenient names. He had a signature quirk, didn't he?
He did. He apparently tucked a little image of a falcon or maybe an owl. Interpretations vary into his compositions as a kind of hidden signature. His style is very lavish, theatrical, often with these fantastical architectural settings.
But how do we know this drawing, the beheading, was likely a finished piece, not just prep work? What's the evidence?
This is where it gets really interesting technically. Look closely at the paper. That yellowish olive background color. It isn't dyed paper like the other chiaroscuros we discussed.
No. What is it then?
It's the result of the paper being oiled
Oiled. Why would they oil the paper?
to make it translucent for tracing.
Ah, so you could lay it over another drawing or lay another sheet on top and see through it to copy the composition exactly.
Precisely. And that is the smoking gun. It tells us this composition was designed for replication. It's a sure sign of commercial production, not just a one-off sketch for a painting.
So this suggests a market for drawings. People were buying them, selling them, gifting them as artworks.
Exactly. This oiled paper technique points directly to an emerging market for drawings as standalone items. And finding surviving examples of drawings on oiled paper is incredibly rare.
Wow.
So this piece isn't just artistically impressive, it's a vital clue about how the art world was changing, how drawings were circulating.
That's a fantastic insight. So moving into that category of finished, maybe commercial drawings, there's another really powerful one of the largest, most enigmatic pieces in the exhibition. Also chiaroscuro, attributed to the Circle of Jan van Scorel.
Oh, that one's an absolute showstopper.
Yeah.
Huge, dramatic, incredibly drawn. It's attributed to Scorel's Circle. He was a major Dutch painter in the first half of the 16th century. But the attribution is tricky because Scorel himself didn't really leave finished drawings quite like this.
What's the scene? You said it was enigmatic.
It's pure chaos. A banquet table is overturned, wine is spilling everywhere, figures are falling, chunks of architecture crashing down from above, and these fantastic, terrifying demons are swooping down, bringing death and destruction.
Yikes. Sounds intense. What is the subject?
Well, that was the mystery. I actually spent quite a while trying to figure it out myself.
Oh, really? Tell us about that. What was your first guess?
My first thought, seemed logical enough, was maybe the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. You know, sinful city, divine wrath, fire and brimstone.
Yeah.
It fit the drama.
Yeah. Makes sense. But wrong.
Completely wrong, as it turned out.
So how did you figure it out? Or did someone else crack it?
It was a brilliant intervention by Professor Peter Plomp, truly legend in the field, Dutch art specialist at NYU. He took one look and pointed out the critical flaw in my Sodom idea. He said, and I'll never forget it, God does not send demons. That is not his weapon.
Oh, right. Okay, so if it's demons doing the destroying, it's not Sodom and Gomorrah. What then?
Exactly. That left me stumped for a while. The real breakthrough came later at a meeting of CODART, that's the International Network for Curators of Dutch and Flemish Art.
Ah, pooling brain power.
Totally. And Mark Evans, who curates Dutch drawings at the V&A in London, he nailed it. He identified the subject, and it's incredibly rare.
Okay, the suspense is killing me. What is it?
It's the destruction of the children of Job from the book of Job in the Bible.
Job. Wow. Okay, I'll refresh my memory on that specific part.
So Satan challenges God about Job's faithfulness.
Yeah.
God gives Satan permission to test Job, inflict suffering, but he's forbidden to actually take Job's life.
Right, I remember that part.
And one of the terrible things Satan does is cause a great wind to strike the house where Job's sons and daughters are feasting. The house collapses, killing them all. And that's what the drawing shows, the banquet, the collapse, the destruction brought in this interpretation by demons acting under Satan's command.
Good heavens. That is incredibly dramatic and rare, you said.
Extremely rare as a subject in art, especially in 16th century Dutch art. I only know of one other major example, really a painting by Bernard van Orley in Brussels. Different style, but depicts the same horrific event.
So this drawing is not just powerful, it's depicting something almost never shown.
Exactly. The energy, the expressiveness, the sheer skill in handling that chaotic scene, it's masterful. Definitely one of the absolute highlights. A hidden story spectacularly revealed.
That really is a perfect example. Which leads us nicely, I think, to maybe the pinnacle of this chiaroscuro drawing technique, a real masterpiece, the portrait study by Jan Gossert, also known as Mabuse.
Ah, Gossert. Yes. This piece is truly exceptional, maybe the standout example of the technique, and just a masterpiece of drawing, period.
Gossert himself was a huge deal in this era, wasn't he?
Absolutely pivotal. He was a real game changer. He made this groundbreaking trip to Rome in 1509.
Okay.
And he was the first Dutch artist to really get the Italian High Renaissance, to fully absorb it and bring it back home. He started painting mythological subjects, nudes, things that weren't common up north. And his religious paintings took on this new, grander Italianate style. There's a great Descent from the Cross by him in the Hermitage, actually.
So he's bringing Italy to the Netherlands, artistically speaking. What makes this particular drawing, the portrait, so special within his work?
Several things. First, just its rarity. We know about 50 drawings by Gossert, give or take.
Yeah.
But only 2 are portraits, and the other one uses a completely different technique.
Only 2 portrait drawings known.
And this one, it's absolutely, unequivocally drawn from a live sitter.
From life, that was rare then.
Incredibly rare for drawings by this point, yes. In the second half of the 15th century, artists mostly stopped making separate portrait drawings from life. They started sketching directly onto the prepared, primed painting panels instead.
Ah, so the preliminary sketches basically became part of the painting process itself? Hidden underneath?
Exactly. Which means those drawings don't survive for us to see. So a surviving portrait drawing from life from this period, there are maybe only about a dozen known in total from the Low Countries. It's exceptionally rare.
That really puts its value into perspective. Now, Gossert met the famous German artist Albrecht Dürer, right, in 1521. Did that encounter leave a mark on this drawing?
It definitely seems like it. Dürer actually praised Gossert very highly in his diary, called him a great master. And Gossert was clearly impressed by Dürer, too. The style of this portrait study owes a lot to Dürer's approach. That meticulous detail, the way the light is handled, you can see the influence. But Gossert has his own feel, too. A slightly more, maybe, open temperament comes through. It's not just imitation.
And the technique itself is just stunning. The fine brushwork, how he captures the curly hair, the look in the eyes, the light on the cheek.
It's a technical tour de force. Absolutely exquisite control.
The shape, it looks almost round or oval. Is that original?
No, definitely not. That's a later alteration, almost certainly cut down from an originally rectangular sheet.
It's not down. Why?
Probably by a collector in the 17th century. Oval formats became fashionable then, and collectors sometimes reshaped older works to fit the current taste. It wasn't typical for 15th or 16th century Dutch portraits.
The whims of later collectors. Okay, now for the really juicy part. The hypothesis that this isn't just any portrait from life, but a self-portrait of Gossert himself.
Yes, this is the most intriguing possibility.
What's the evidence? Do we know what Gossert looked like from other sources?
Direct evidence of his appearance is very scarce, unfortunately. So he can't do a simple comparison. The argument is more subtle. It rests on what art historians sometimes call the auto-portrait quality.
Auto-portrait quality, meaning?
It's hard to put into words precisely. But it's a certain magnetism, an unusual openness and emotional directness in the gaze, that feeling you often get from self-portraits, where the artist is both observer and observed. There's an intensity there.
A kind of psychological connection you feel.
Something like that, yes. And if this is Gossart, think about it. It would make this drawing unbelievably precious, because it would be the only known self-portrait drawing from the entire 16th century Netherlands.
The only one. That's incredible.
It really underscores his importance, doesn't it? Bringing the Renaissance north, mastering this incredible technique, and maybe leaving us this unique personal glimpse. He truly set the stage for the Italianate style that would dominate Dutch art, especially drawing later in the century. What a legacy.
It's just amazing what these pieces of paper can hold. Whole histories, techniques, even personal mysteries.
They're not static images at all. They're alive with stories.
Well, this has been an absolutely incredible journey through these 16th century Dutch drawings. We've seen them as practical tools, blueprints for glass painters.
Meticulously saved, reused.
Right through to standalone masterpieces. Uncovering hidden stories like the Job drawing, or witnessing these amazing technical innovations like chiaroscuro and oiled paper.
And maybe even finding the face of the artist himself.
It just goes to show, doesn't it, how much you can discover just by looking closely, taking the time, even with something seemingly simple like a drawing. Layers of history, purpose, genius, often with these surprising twists.
It really proves the power of observation. And that leads us to a final thought for you, our listener.
Yeah, something to think about. What other hidden stories might be waiting for you, just beneath the surface of the things you see, the things you observe every single day?